Arden stood tall in front of his commanding officers, his eyes scanning the room. The victory was his. His team had crushed the alien forces in the biggest battle Earth had ever seen. But now it was time for the reward. The military leaders had gathered to present him with a prize worthy of his bravery. Usually, soldiers would choose valuable resources, weapons, or land. But today, the prize was different. The officers spoke, their voices filled with admiration for Arden's heroic actions. As a token of our gratitude, we offer you a reward of your choosing, one of the senior commanders said. Arden had heard the same words many times before, but this time, something felt different. His thoughts wandered to the future. The war was far from over, and perhaps a new challenge was what he needed. That's when his eyes landed on her. Across the room stood Princess Sorella, the weakest and most fragile member of the alien royal family. She was an alien of delicate beauty, with pale skin and large dark eyes. Her appearance was almost ethereal. But it was her reputation that caught Arden's attention. She had been captured during the battle, and many believed her to be of little use to anyone. She was seen as a prisoner, a trophy of war. Her frailty had made her seem almost like a liability, someone to pity. Yet, for some reason, Arden couldn't help but feel there was more to her than met the eye. He was used to seeing strength in all forms, but this princess, her vulnerability intrigued him. Maybe, just maybe, she could become something more than what others had written her off to be. Arden stepped forward, his decision already made. He addressed the commanders calmly, his voice steady. I choose the princess. There was a collective pause in the room. The officers exchanged surprised glances. Choosing Sorella was unheard of. She wasn't just weak. She was a symbol of everything they had conquered, and yet Arden had chosen her. Are you sure? One of the commanders asked, skepticism in his tone. She is of no use to you in battle. She is a prisoner, Arden. Arden's gaze never wavered. I see potential in her. Not every strength can be measured in brute force. There is something about her that others don't see. The officers were silent, but none challenged his decision. They had seen Arden's unyielding spirit on the battlefield, and if he believed in something, it was hard to argue with him. Princess Sorella's expression remained unreadable, but a flicker of something, perhaps curiosity, shone in her eyes. She had been surrounded by those who saw her as weak her entire life. To have someone, especially a human soldier, believe in her was a strange feeling. As Arden approached her, he gave her a small nod. You are coming with me. I'll help you become more than what you are now. Sorella looked up at him, uncertain of how to respond. No one had ever offered her a chance like this, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to take it. And so, their journey began. Neither Arden nor Sorella could have known that this decision would set them on a path that would change both their lives forever. Princess Sorella stood in the middle of the training yard, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the practice sword. She had never held a weapon in her life, let alone fought in a battle. Her entire existence had been spent in the comfort of royal palaces, shielded from the harsh realities of war. The soldiers around her were skilled, their movements precise and confident, while Sorella felt out of place. Arden stood nearby, watching her with patience in his eyes. He had asked her to join the training session, and though she had hesitated at first, she now found herself here, uncertain and nervous. Everyone in the yard had seen her, the fragile alien princess, and many had whispered behind her back. Some even laughed. They didn't think she had the strength to do anything more than look pretty in her silken robes. But Arden wasn't like the others. He had chosen her, believing there was more to her than what others saw. Sorella wasn't sure she believed it herself. Don't hold the sword like that. Arden's voice broke through her thoughts. He walked over to her, his steps heavy, as if every part of him was focused on her success. He reached out and adjusted her grip on the hilt. Hold it firmly. You need control. She nodded, trying to do as he said, but her fingers felt stiff and awkward around the sword. The weight of it felt wrong in her hands. She had never been asked to do anything like this before. Again, Arden said, his tone calm but firm. "Swing it at the target." Sorella hesitated. The target in front of her seemed so far away, and her body didn't feel strong enough to move with purpose. She swung the sword weakly, the blade cutting through the air with little force. The sword clattered to the ground with a soft thud. Her face turned red. "I'm not like the others, Arden," she said quietly. "I can't do this." Arden didn't respond immediately. Instead, he knelt down, picking up the sword and placing it back in her hands. He looked up at her, his gaze unwavering. "No one starts strong, Sorella, but everyone can grow. You have the strength within you. It's just waiting to be unlocked." Sorella swallowed hard, staring at the sword as if it were a symbol of everything she had never been able to do. She had always been treated like a delicate flower, one that was admired but never touched, never forced to grow. She wasn't sure if she was ready to change. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "You can," Arden said softly, standing up. "It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. You just need to push through the doubt. Trust me." Sorella looked at him, her mind racing. Could she really become more than the princess everyone had always seen? She had always been told that her strength lay in her beauty, her grace, but there was no grace in a sword fight, no beauty in a battle. As the days passed, Sorella found herself in the training yard more often than she ever imagined. At first, it was a struggle. Her body was sore, and her confidence remained low. But with every swing of the sword, she felt something inside her stir, a small spark of strength that she had never known before. It wasn't easy, and she wasn't perfect. But with Arden's help, she began to believe that perhaps she could become more than just a fragile princess. Maybe, just maybe, she could become the warrior that Arden saw in her. The days turned into weeks, and Princess Sorella found herself growing stronger, both physically and mentally. Her once trembling hands now held the sword with more confidence, though she still struggled to match the skill of the seasoned soldiers around her. But one thing had changed. She no longer doubted herself as much as she once did. Each day, with Arden's guidance, she pushed her limits. It was early in the morning when Arden walked up to her in the training yard, his expression serious. He had been observing her progress closely, and now he felt it was time to take the next step. "Sorella," he called, his voice calm but commanding. "I think it's time for you to face a real challenge." Sorella looked up at him, unsure of what he meant. She had been training with wooden swords, against stationary targets, and even the occasional sparring partner, but she had never been in a real fight. The thought of it made her stomach twist with fear. "I'm not ready," she said quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't fight like the others. I'm still too weak." Arden's gaze softened, and he stepped closer. "You've come a long way, Sorella. You're stronger than you think. It's time to see if you can handle yourself in a real fight. This is the next step in your training." Sorella's heart raced. She had always been protected, always kept safe from harm. But now, the world was changing. She couldn't hide behind her title or her past anymore. She had to face this challenge head-on, or risk being left behind. Arden's voice was steady. "Today, you'll spar with one of the soldiers. It won't be easy, but I know you're ready for this." Sorella took a deep breath. The fear was still there, but so was something else. Determination. She couldn't let Arden down. She couldn't let herself down. The soldier who would spar with her stepped forward. He was taller, stronger, and far more experienced. His eyes were full of confidence, and Sorella could see that he wasn't going to go easy on her. "Ready?" the soldier asked, his voice almost mocking. Sorella nodded, gripping the sword tighter. The first few moments were a blur. The soldier was quick, his movements swift and practiced. Sorella tried to keep up, but her sword felt heavy in her hands, and her arms ached. The soldier's strikes were relentless, and she struggled to defend herself. A few minutes into the fight, Sorella found herself on the ground, her sword knocked away. She lay there, breathing heavily, her body aching. The soldier stood over her, a smug smile on his face. Arden's voice rang out across the yard. "Get up, Sorella. Don't give up." Sorella's mind raced. She wanted to stay on the ground, to give in to the pain and the embarrassment. But something inside her refused to stay down. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to let a setback stop her now. With a groan, she pushed herself to her feet. The soldier looked surprised, but his smile faded. "Let's try again," she said, her voice firm. This time, Sorella moved with more focus. She remembered what Arden had taught her: control, patience, and persistence. She parried a blow, then countered with her own strike. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than before. Arden watched from the sidelines, his face serious but hopeful. Sorella was making progress. She wasn't just a fragile princess anymore. She was becoming a warrior. And with each new challenge, she was learning that her strength was something no one could take away from her, not even herself. The warning came in the form of a message from the Galactic Command. A fleet of alien invaders, known as the Forai, was approaching Earth. The Forai were fierce and relentless, with a reputation for destroying entire planets. Their ships were enormous, their weapons deadly, and their goal was simple: domination. Arden stood in the command room, staring at the holographic display of the Forai fleet moving toward Earth. The war was about to escalate to a new level, and every soldier, every commander, every resource would be needed. But even with all their strength, Earth's forces were uncertain of their ability to fend off the Forai. Arden knew it would be a brutal fight. "Arden," a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Captain Lyanna, one of his fellow officers. "We need all hands on deck. You're to lead the front lines. But there's something else." Arden turned to her. "What is it?" Captain Lyanna hesitated for a moment before speaking. "We've received an offer from the alien forces. They've made an unusual demand." Arden raised an eyebrow. "What kind of demand?" "They've requested the princess. They want Princess Sorella." The words hung in the air, thick with tension. Sorella's presence was no accident. She had once been an important figure among the Forai, but now her loyalty was with the humans. Arden knew that the Forai might see her as a symbol of weakness, but in reality, she was more than just a princess. She had become a warrior in her own right. "If we give her to them," Captain Lyanna continued, "they might back off. They could stop the invasion." Arden frowned. The decision weighed heavily on him. He knew the Forai's reputation for cruelty, and handing over Sorella would not guarantee Earth's safety. But at the same time, if he refused, they would be risking the lives of everyone. "I can't," Arden said firmly. "I won't let them take her." Captain Lyanna didn't argue. She understood his loyalty to Sorella, just as everyone else had come to understand it. Over the weeks, Sorella had proven herself as more than just a symbol of peace. She had become an asset to Earth's defense. Arden turned to face Sorella, who was now standing by the door. Her presence was calm, but the concern in her eyes was obvious. "What's happening?" she asked quietly. "We're about to face the Forai," Arden said, his voice low. "And they've made a demand for you." Sorella's gaze flickered to the display showing the Forai fleet. She had heard of their ruthless ways. "What will you do?" she asked, her voice steady. Arden looked at her with determination. "I won't let them take you. You've become part of this fight, and I'm not giving you up." Sorella's eyes softened, and for the first time, a small smile tugged at her lips. She had never expected to hear such words. "I'm not a princess anymore," she said, stepping closer to him. "I'm a warrior. Let me fight with you." Arden hesitated. She had come so far in her training, but this was a battle unlike any they had fought before. It was one of survival, and the stakes were higher than ever. "Are you sure?" Arden asked. "I'm sure," Sorella replied, her voice strong. And with that, a new chapter of their fight began. Earth's fate was no longer in the hands of just the soldiers. Now it was up to Arden, Sorella, and the rest of the defenders to stand united against the alien threat. Together, they would face the Forai, and together, They would fight for survival. The Forai fleet loomed closer every day, their massive warships casting a dark shadow over Earth's defenses. The atmosphere on the planet grew tense. Soldiers were preparing for the fight of their lives, and Arden spent every waking moment strategizing, making sure his team was ready for what was to come. But this battle was unlike any they had fought before. This time, it wasn't just about victory, it was about survival. Amidst the chaos, Princess Sorella continued her training. Her swordsmanship had improved significantly, but she knew that this fight would test everything she had learned and more. The enemy wasn't like any opponent she had faced in her training sessions. The Forai were ruthless, and she could not afford to make any mistakes. Arden had insisted she keep training, even when others doubted her. He believed in her strength, even when she had trouble believing in herself. As the days went by, Sorella's confidence grew. She was no longer the fragile princess that everyone thought she was. She had become a warrior. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Arden approached her in the training yard. Sorella was practicing her strikes on a target, her movements faster and more precise than before. She was breathing heavily, but determination shone in her eyes. "You're improving," Arden said as he watched her. His voice was filled with approval, though there was still a trace of concern in his eyes. "But it's not enough. You'll need to push yourself even harder if you want to survive the battle with the Forai." Sorella nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. "I know. I'm ready." Arden walked over to her, a serious expression on his face. "The Forai won't give you a chance to hesitate. They'll take advantage of any weakness. I need you to be strong, both in mind and body. We're about to face a real enemy." Sorella's grip tightened on her sword. She had never felt more prepared or more nervous. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what lay ahead, but she had come too far to back down now. "I'm ready," she repeated, her voice steady. "I won't let you down." Arden gave her a small nod. "I know you won't, but remember, it's not just about fighting. It's about thinking. The Forai will try to confuse you, to wear you down. You'll need to stay focused." Sorella took a deep breath, her mind racing. The pressure was intense, but she wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not when Earth was counting on her. The days leading up to the battle passed quickly. The human fleet prepared its weapons, sharpened its strategies, and reinforced its defenses. But for Sorella, the battle wasn't just about fighting. It was about proving to herself that she could rise above the princess she once was. She was no longer a symbol of weakness. She was a warrior, and she would fight like one. The night before the battle, Arden found her standing on the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. She was quiet, her face calm, but there was a fire in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. "Tomorrow," she said softly, turning to him, "we fight for everything." Arden nodded. "Tomorrow, we win. Together." And with that, Sorella finally felt ready. She had come a long way from the fragile princess, and now she was ready to stand alongside Arden in the battle against the Forai. She had no doubt that her training would be put to the test, but she was ready to face whatever came her way. The day of the battle had arrived, and the tension was thick in the air. The human fleet was stationed in orbit around Earth, and the Forai fleet was closing in, their massive warships blocking out the stars. It was the final countdown before the clash. Everyone had their roles, and everyone was ready for the fight. In the command center, Arden stood at the front, his eyes focused on the holographic displays. Soldiers and commanders around him were making their final preparations. The sound of clicking buttons and the low hum of machinery filled the room. The crew was tense, but there was a calmness in Arden's demeanor. He had seen battles before, but this one felt different. This time, his thoughts kept drifting back to Sorella. She had come so far. From the weak, frightened princess who had once been nothing more than a symbol of peace to the warrior she had become. Arden had watched her grow every day, pushing herself in training, learning to fight with a strength that had surprised even him. She was no longer just a princess. She was a partner, someone he could rely on in this fight. "Sorella," Arden called, turning around to find her standing at the doorway. Her face was calm, but there was a determination in her eyes. She had never looked more like a warrior. She had donned her armor, lightweight but sturdy, designed for agility. The sight of her in the uniform made it clear that she was no longer the fragile figure she had once been. She was ready for this fight. "I'm ready," she said, stepping forward, her voice steady. Arden nodded. "I know you are." The two stood for a moment in silence, the weight of the situation settling in. The battle wasn't just about survival. It was about everything they had worked for. Earth's future, the lives of countless people, and the future of their alliance with the alien worlds. It all rested on their shoulders. "You've come so far, Sorella," Arden said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. "You're not the same person who walked into the training yard months ago. You're stronger now, and that's what will get us through this." Sorella's gaze softened, but there was no hesitation in her voice. "I'm not doing this alone, Arden. You've taught me more than just how to fight. You've taught me what it means to stand up for something, what it means to believe in myself. I'm fighting for everyone here, and for Earth, but most of all, I'm fighting for us." The words hung in the air between them, a silent promise. Arden had never expected such a connection to form, but now, as he looked at Sorella, he realized how deeply he had come to care for her. Not just as a warrior, but as a person. Someone who had changed his life in ways he had never imagined. "Together, then," he said, his voice firm. "Let's make sure the Forai know they made a mistake when they came for Earth." Sorella smiled, a quiet strength in her eyes. Together. The two of them stood side by side, ready to face whatever awaited them. Arden knew that with Sorella by his side, they had a better chance than ever of winning this battle. But it wasn't just about the fight. It was about what they had built together. The bond that had formed between them in the heat of training, in the quiet moments of trust and support, had made them stronger than any weapon or army. As they stepped onto the bridge of their ship, ready to lead the charge, Arden felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for a future. And together, they would win it. The roar of the engines echoed through the ship as it cut through space, heading straight for the incoming Forai fleet. Sorella stood beside Arden on the command deck, her hand steady on the railing, her eyes focused on the vastness of the stars. The Forai's fleet was massive, their ships like shadows in the distance. Every ship in Earth's fleet was prepared. But even with their strength, the coming battle would be their hardest yet. Arden could feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. He had led battles before, but this felt different. This wasn't just a mission. It was the fight for Earth's survival. And this time, Sorella would be with him, standing side by side as equals. He couldn't help but glance over at her. She looked ready, her face calm, her eyes full of determination. "You've come a long way," Arden said quietly, his voice filled with a sense of pride. "I've never seen anyone grow so much in such a short time." Sorella met his gaze, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I didn't do it alone. You were with me every step of the way." The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. Arden had never expected this journey to become as much about their bond as it was about the war. Sorella had become more than just a student, more than just the princess she once was. She was his partner now, in every sense of the word. The ship shook as it entered the battlefield, the Forai's fleet now in full view, massive warships, each one bristling with weapons, lined up in front of Earth's defenses. The enemy had come in full force, their desire to conquer clear in the cold void of space. "Brace for impact." The captain's voice echoed over the intercom. The ship's crew moved quickly, preparing for the fight that was about to begin. Arden and Sorella took their positions, joining their team of soldiers. The atmosphere was tense, but there was no turning back now. They were in the fight of their lives. As the first wave of enemy ships approached, Arden's voice rang out over the comms, giving commands to the fleet. "All units, engage. Protect the planet at all costs." The battle erupted in a flurry of lasers, explosions, and chaotic movement. Arden's hands were steady as he directed his soldiers, guiding them through the madness. But he could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This was no longer just about strategy. It was about survival. Sorella was in the thick of it now. She fought with the fierce determination that Arden had seen in her from the very beginning. She moved swiftly, her training kicking in as she dodged blasts, countered attacks, and fought side by side with the humans. Her sword struck true as she cut down an enemy soldier, her eyes never leaving the battlefield. She was no longer the weak princess. She was a warrior. Then the unthinkable happened. A massive Vorai warship broke through their defenses, heading straight for Earth's fleet. Its weapons powered up, aiming directly at the human flagship. The ship's shields began to crack under the pressure, and Arden could see the panic rising among the crew. This was their moment of danger, the ultimate test. Arden turned to Sorella. "We have to stop that ship. Together." She nodded without hesitation. "Let's do it." Together, they fought their way through the chaos, heading straight for the heart of the enemy ship. It was a risky move, but there was no other choice. As they reached the core of the Vorai ship, Sorella's sword glowed with the energy of her determination. She had trained for this moment, and now she was going to prove it. With one final strike, she pierced the core, sending a shockwave through the ship. The enemy vessel exploded, its massive form breaking apart as the crew of Earth's fleet cheered. Sorella stood tall, her chest rising and falling with each breath. She had done it. She had faced the ultimate test, and she had passed. Arden stood beside her, his eyes full of admiration. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with pride. Sorella looked at him, her eyes shining. "We did it." And with that, the battle was won. The Vorai fleet was defeated, and Earth's people had survived. But more than that, Sorella had proven herself. She was no longer just a princess. She was a true warrior, and together, with Arden, they had secured Earth's future. The battle was over. The Vorai fleet, once an unstoppable force, had been shattered. Earth's defenses had held strong, and victory was theirs. The air was filled with the sound of cheers and celebration. But for Arden and Sorella, the victory was bittersweet. They stood on the bridge of their flagship, gazing out at the remains of the enemy ships drifting in space. Sorella's heart pounded in her chest, but it wasn't from fear this time. It was the rush of adrenaline wearing off, replaced by the realization that they had truly won. She had done it. She had fought alongside Arden and the human soldiers, and together they had turned the tide of the battle. She wasn't just the princess anymore. She had become something more. Arden stood beside her, his hands resting on the console in front of him. He glanced at her, a sense of pride in his eyes. She had come so far from the timid princess he had first met. She was no longer just a symbol of royalty, but a fierce warrior. "You did it, Sorella," Arden said quietly, his voice filled with respect. "You proved to everyone, most importantly, to yourself, that you are more than what they thought." Sorella's gaze softened, and she nodded slowly. She had never imagined she would be standing here, not as a princess, but as a warrior who had helped save Earth. Her past had been full of expectations, but now she had forged her own path. "I couldn't have done it without you, Arden," she said, her voice sincere. "You believed in me when no one else did. You saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself." Arden smiled, but there was a sadness behind his eyes. The battle was over, but the war for Earth's future was far from finished. There would be more threats, more dangers, and more decisions to make. But in this moment, he allowed himself to appreciate the quiet victory they had earned. The crew around them began to celebrate, but the two of them stood in silence, watching the stars outside the ship. The universe was vast, and they had just won one battle. But in a galaxy filled with enemies and unknown dangers, there would be more challenges to face. As the ship began its return to Earth, Arden turned to Sorella. "We've won today, but tomorrow we build. We rebuild Earth, and we protect what we've worked so hard to create." Sorella looked out at the stars again, her mind racing. She had started this journey as someone who had been lost, unsure of her place in the galaxy. But now she was certain of one thing. She had a purpose. She wasn't just a pawn in someone else's game. She had a role to play in the future of Earth and its people. "I'll fight beside you, Arden," she said, her voice full of conviction. "We've only just begun." And with those words, they both knew that this victory was just the beginning of something greater. Together, they would face whatever came next, standing side by side as warriors, ready to protect their home and build a future stronger than ever before. The days after the battle were filled with both relief and rebuilding. Earth had survived the Forai invasion, but the cost was high. Cities were damaged, and many had lost loved ones. But in the midst of the destruction, there was hope. The people of Earth had fought back and proved that they were not weak, not helpless. And now, with the Forai defeated, the future was theirs to shape. Sorella stood on the balcony of the command center, looking out at the horizon. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the planet she had fought to protect. It had been months since she had first stepped onto this world as a prisoner. Now she stood as a protector, a warrior who had earned her place alongside the humans. Arden walked up behind her, his presence as steady as always. He had been busy overseeing the recovery efforts, ensuring that Earth's forces remained strong and ready for whatever came next. But in this moment, he allowed himself a brief break to reflect on everything they had achieved. Sorella turned to him, her face calm but her eyes full of the same determination that had carried her through the battle. "It's hard to believe it's over," she said softly, almost to herself. Arden smiled, his gaze meeting hers. "It's never truly over. There will always be more to do, more to protect. But we've made it through the hardest part." The two of them stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the last rays of the sun dip below the horizon. For the first time since the battle began, Sorella felt a sense of peace. She had spent so long fighting against the idea of who she was supposed to be. Weak, fragile, a symbol of peace. But now she knew who she was. She was a warrior, and she had earned her place in this new world. "Where do we go from here?" she asked, breaking the silence. Arden glanced out at the horizon, his expression thoughtful. "We rebuild, we defend, and we prepare. Earth's future depends on us, but it also depends on the alliances we make. There are other forces out there, other threats, and there are new opportunities too." Sorella nodded, her thoughts racing. The galaxy was vast, and Earth was just one small piece of it. There were many challenges ahead, but she no longer felt afraid. With Arden by her side, and with the strength she had discovered within herself, she was ready for whatever came next. "I never imagined this would be my life," she said, her voice filled with quiet awe. "I never imagined I'd be standing here, looking at Earth with so much hope." "You've earned every bit of it," Arden replied. "You've become more than anyone could have expected." Sorella smiled at him, the bond between them growing stronger with each passing day. They had started this journey as unlikely allies, but now they were partners in every sense of the word. Together, they had fought for Earth's survival, and together, they would continue to fight for its future. "There's still so much to do," Sorella said, her voice filled with determination. "We've only just begun." Arden nodded, his eyes locking with hers. "Together, we'll face whatever comes next. Together, we'll build a future worth fighting for." And with that, they turned toward the future, ready to face the challenges that awaited them, knowing that whatever came their way, they would face it side by side, stronger than ever. The world had begun to heal. The streets of Earth were slowly being cleared of the rubble left by the Forai invasion. The skies were no longer filled with the smoke of burning cities, but with the bright light of a new dawn. Earth had won, but the battle for the future was far from over. Arden stood on the balcony of the command center, looking out at the busy city below. People were working together, rebuilding their homes, their lives, and their hope. The planet was recovering, and there was a sense of unity in the air that hadn't been felt in a long time. Beside him stood Sorella. She had been working tirelessly alongside the humans, helping with the rebuilding efforts and offering her guidance to the newly formed Council of Leaders. She had once been a princess, a symbol of weakness to many. But now she was a leader, a warrior who had earned her place in this new world. Sorella looked up at Arden, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I never imagined we'd come this far," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I used to think I was just a figurehead, something to be admired from a distance. But now, I feel like I truly belong here." Arden turned to her, his expression full of pride. "You've earned everything, Sorella. You fought for this world, and you fought for yourself. There's no one who deserves to be here more than you." She smiled, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied. "You believed in me when no one else did. You gave me the chance to prove myself." Arden's heart swelled with warmth. He had never expected their journey to bring them here, side by side, as equals. They had started as strangers, both unsure of what lay ahead. But through every challenge, every battle, they had found strength in each other. Their bond had been forged in the heat of war, and now it was unbreakable. "The real reward isn't the victory," Arden said quietly, his voice thoughtful. "It's the journey we've shared, the person you've become. You've gone from being the weakest to one of the strongest, not just in battle, but in heart. That's what makes you a true leader." Sorella's eyes filled with emotion as she looked at him. "And you've taught me that being strong doesn't mean doing everything alone. It means standing together." The words hung in the air, simple yet powerful. In a galaxy filled with conflict, they had found something worth fighting for. They had found each other. And together, they had won not just the battle, but the chance to build a better future. "Together," Sorella echoed, her voice firm with resolve. As the sun set over the city, casting a golden glow on the world below, Arden and Sorella knew that this was only the beginning. They had faced the greatest challenge of their lives, and they had come out victorious. But there was still so much to do, so many lives to rebuild, so many futures to protect. And no matter what came next, they would face it together. The true reward was not just surviving, but finding strength in each other and building a world worth protecting. Together, they would shape the future, side by side.